just looking over the participant list. I believe we have a quorum. Is that right, Deb?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I think I will go ahead and call this special meeting of the Regional Planning Commission to order. It's Friday, March 12th, 2021. Deb, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Deb Frank-Finan,
Here.
Joan Dykstra,
Here.
Charles Smith, Tammy Fruling-Bogus,
Present.
Patrick Brown,
Here.
Dennis Roberts,
I'm here.
Darlene Feppel, Kyle Patterson,
Here.
Jim Goss,
Here.
Will Kiles, Bettina Wilcher,
I'm here.
Anna Olween, and Diane Marlin.
Present.
Thank you.
All right, next up is approval of the agenda. Could we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Jim Goss, second.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
I can make the motion, Jim Goss. I thought there was a motion.
Okay, Jim Goss made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Tammy.
Seconded by Tammy. We have a roll call vote, please.
Deb Frank-Finan,
Yes.
Joan Dykstra,
Yes.
Charles Smith, Tammy Fruling-Bogus,
Yes.
Patrick Brown,
Yes. Yes.
Dennis Roberts,
Yes.
Darlene Feppel, Kyle Patterson,
Yes.
Jim Goss,
Yes.
Will Kiles, Bettina Wilcher,
Yes.
Anna Olween, and Diane Marlin.
Yes,
Thank you.
that motion passes. Next item on the agenda is audience participation. Does anyone wish to address this board? Please raise your hand.
Was this outside audience participation?
Pardon?
This is Karina Rubio from WCIA. The audio broke up. Were you asking if anyone would like to address the board from outside participation?
This is the time for public input, yes.
Yes, I did have a few questions. I'm sure you'll move through it as we go through the meeting. As I said, my name is Karina from WCIA, and we had just had some outside concerns brought to us about the RPC, and that was in regards to audits that were due in 2019 and March 2020 that were not completed at that deadline. And I was just wanting to confirm that that is still the case and that that is still needing to be completed by the RPC.
Yes, that will be addressed in this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other audience participation? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to new business. First item is 2019 Champaign County Audit Update from George Danos, County Auditor, and Michael Mollett, Baker Tilly.
Are we introducing the subject at hand?
Yes, we are.
Michael, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. As far as I can tell, this ad hoc meeting was convened because the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity it gave us a 15-day notice of noncompliance, suddenly noticing that the 2019 audit wasn't completed by the end of last year. Now, we had been in communication with them and did not receive anything. We think that, ironically, our compliance with the Department of Health and Human Services, or the Illinois Department of Human Services, is what triggered their notification process. Nevertheless, the wording states that a stop pay is their enforcement procedure. We appealed it immediately, and then they issued a decline, which we suspect is pro forma. I do have the department head in a discussion with me today at 1:30 p.m. to look at options. I'll have plenty more to say. Perhaps Michael Malott could jump in just to discuss timelines, but maybe that we should go right into the back and forth. The only thing I would want to ask WCIA is who her interlocutor is and what she means when she refers to March audits.
Was just referring to information that was brought to us and saying that an audit on 2019 was due by March 2020, and then that deadline was missed, which was then.
Yeah, I don't know what that refers to.
Let's move on to the, if any information is available from Baker Tilly.
Yes, so, throughout the course of the audit, both the prior years and now focusing on the 2019 audit, our timeline for really since we really turned to 2019, since the completion of 2018 audit was a June 1 issuance. This is obviously before everything that's happened in the recent weeks. And where we're currently sitting is a substantial part of the audit has been completed. All work associated with RPC on the federal compliance component has been done. There are major pieces of the county as a whole audit that is completed, but some still yet to be completed due to a wide array of reasons. With us getting started, certain areas in certain departments, we're simply just getting started on because we are wrapping up their previous audit work. In turn, we are working with George and Orion and their team to identify a solution to expedite the timing of our work. Some of that is just identifying resources in our firm to free up so that we can do it. I'm still in the process of working through that, and we'll be connecting with George and his team today at some point once I get a little more information from other people in my firm, so I can come with an idea of what we can and cannot do. So, in terms of timing, that's kind of where I currently sit at from the auditor perspective. We're working through the audit. I'd say we're substantially completed with some significant areas still to do, including report review and some other elements that we'll be working with the auditor's office to expedite in our best way possible. My concern would be June 1 is our target. It's going to be hard to push it up, but we're going to do our best to try to do the best we can to expedite this, especially if George has more information later on from his conversations that require us to do so.
Before we move on, I wanted the record to show that Darlene Kleppel and Anna Ogween have joined the meeting as board members. Are there any questions specifically for George Danos or Michael Malott at this point from the board members? I don't see any on my screen, but I have missed things before in Zoom, so shout out if you do have a question.
Mayor Marlin.
Yes. Yes, Deb.
Auditor Dennis, I'm just wondering if you have engaged the state's attorney's office to be on any calls with you as part of all of this.
Oh, did you say Danos or Dennis?
I don't think I can help.
George, sorry. Yes. Have you talked to the state's attorney's office? My concern is that I think there's some legal issues here, and I want to make sure that you're getting everything
Right.
that you
No,
need.
great.
So that we can move this.
I'm not at liberty to say which lawyers I spoke to because they're not ready to deliver an opinion. It occurred to me this morning that this may be an issue for the Attorney General because I have a State Department head feeling that his hands are bound by a federal regulation that is not being imposed on us by the federal grantor oversight. That sounds like he needs legal advice. So I have reached out at different levels, including legislative.
Any other questions? Dennis?
So it sounds like the audit for the part that is related to the future of the Regional Planning Commission has been completed, and that you're looking for completion in the county. So is that does the entire audit including anything that you're doing relating to the county, have to be completed before this audit is considered complete?
Yes.
If it has to do only with the Regional Planning Commission and we've completed that part, can we go forward?
No, one of the reasons we meet together is because the Regional Planning Commission is not self-contained in terms of compliance. The stop payment list can come simply because the county isn't timely in the issuance of the audit in not having the opinion. So that's right at the end of the chain. That's when Baker Tilly gives an opinion on our financial statements and all supporting documents. So that opens up a very good question. So I'd like to alert the commissioners to what I'm waiting for. I'm just being matter of fact, I released a memo that will go to the county board on Thursday a little early because of this notice of noncompliance. I do await the financial report from the circuit clerk and the collector account reconciliations from the treasurer. I have been asked to identify some resources, and I have. There is a possibility, I don't want to speak for department head, she's not on though, that the circuit clerk does have some flexibility in retaining the services of Baker Tilly for an out-of-scope service, which would be to complete this year's financial report for them. Michael, do you have a quote do you have a quote for us on that incidentally?
I'm currently working on that. My biggest, the quote isn't the issue, it's resources, and we're working on that, trying to free up the appropriate people to help support both helping get the audit completed from the county side, but also help the circuit clerk with their kind of additional needs to ensure the financial information is ready to go. So that is currently in process. I should have more concrete information today.
Okay, thank you. In any case, Monday morning, I'm meeting with both of those two county department heads to trim up the timetable and identify resources. In the case of a treasurer, CJ's on the call, forgive me, I haven't discussed this, but it occurred to me late evening that one idea is that the 2018 banker reconciliations were completed by the previous interim deputy treasurer. If he's available, I think that that'd be a great opportunity to finish up 2019, and then it alongside the current, that would itself be a training opportunity for going forward. So those are two resources I've identified to expedite the completion of the audit, regardless of the findings of the DCEO. Nevertheless, I'm still hoping that he understands his prerogatives. There have been 4 department heads since I become auditor. There have been 4 department heads at the state level. So this may just be an eye opener for him with regard to intergovernmental relations and the difference between restrictions and prerogatives on the part of the state of Illinois.
Any other questions from board members for George or Michael?
I have one. This is Patrick Brown.
Okay.
Obviously I'll talk more about this later, but obviously reaching a very frustration point because of this happening second time in a row for us.
No, it hasn't, Patrick. We did not get a notice of non-compliance last year. You merely put
hold on. I'm talking about the lateness of the audit, and by no means blaming Mr. Danos, so don't interpret it that way.
Okay.
We know what the issue is. I mean, you mentioned about, and I think it's clear, and I think I said this a year ago, or more than a year ago, that based on the fact that we're still waiting on the treasurer to complete 2018 financials, and that obviously, 2019 financials, that obviously means they haven't even started on 2020 financials, which is pretty much done for a whole year. So we're going to have this same issue a year from now. So I just want that kind of noted. Again, not blaming Mr. Danos. I know you're relying on other people for this, but it just seems like this is just going to keep coming back and biting us. So I don't know what else to say. I think normally the audit is usually complete, and correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere around in the fall, like September, October period, or October, November is usually when that's done.
Yeah, it's seamless. If you're done by September 30th, you don't have to file for any extensions.
Okay.
I did address my timetable at the county board on January 21st. So I think I would encourage you to take a look at what we've identified, and I indicated some of the favorable indications. The 2019 audit, the 2018 audit was completed on July 7th. Now we're going to get to June 1st, and that's even in the midst of two departmental transitions plus the installation of a brand new ERP, the first thing in 40 years. So, I mean, we're still trying to be done with the 2020 audit by the end of the year. But of course, you're right. I have a couple inputs coming in, and I think that's a second reason why it'd be good to bring back. I may as well say Pius Weibel to do the collector reconciliations for 2019. I think that it would make sure that 2020. There's been really good recent experience on doing that for the sake of 2020. And then I couldn't speak for the circuit clerk, but I think that she will resolve some internal personnel issues that would result in a fixation on her contribution to the annual financial report. There was a vacancy in the fiscal manager position for a year, and I think that's what accumulated a backlog from that source. So okay, so I understand your frustration is a little different from what I interpreted, but I'm totally conscious of all the inputs and trying to make sure that the weakest link in the chain is firmed up.
Okay, any other specific questions from the board? All right.
Mayor Marlin?
Yeah.
I don't know that the auditor and Baker Tilly are planning to get off the call, but I think it would be helpful to hear from our staff and then be able to ask additional questions if necessary after that.
I agree. We're about to move on. Okay, we'll hear from our CEO and financial officer, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This presentation on the impact of the audit concerns that have been shared with you, that's what we're going to go through, and Betty and I will do this, but I will begin. I do want to, before I get into the presentation, based on the question that was asked by the media, and I think Dennis Roberts sort of set the context, and I want to reemphasize that this is not about an audit issue with the Regional Planning Commission. We are part of Champaign County, and so this is about Champaign County's audit, which we're part of. So I just want to make sure that there's no mischaracterization that there are some audit issues within the Regional Planning Commission. With that said, I'm going to get into the presentation. So Rita, I'm ready to go. The first thing is that there's this letter that was received, I believe might have been this week, from DCEO as a result of the county auditor submitting an appeal regarding the communication from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, stressing that we would be placed on this no payment list as a result of being out of compliance due to the fact that the FY 2019 audit has been late. It should have been submitted and filed, I believe, by the end of December, which that takes into account the extensions that were granted as a result of the pandemic and so forth. One of the things that I think everybody else should understand is that we, meaning the Regional Planning Commission as the department of the county, were one of the departments that is solely funded by both federal and state grants. And so a lot of these regulations are attributed to us given the fact that we are primarily grant funded. And I would say that about 90% of the funding that we receive here at the Regional Planning Commission are both federal and state grants. And so the letter basically indicates that we have missed the deadline for this FY 2019 audit to be submitted. And I think the key thing, and I think it was alluded to by the county auditor, is the fact that DCEO, as our cognizant agency, meaning that we get most of our funding from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, they've indicated in this letter that they do not have the authority to essentially lift this this stop payment list. And they've cited some regulations to that effect. And so I think that's what the county auditor was alluding to, that perhaps they would need to confer with the Attorney General's office. The other thing that I also wanted to highlight from the letter that was submitted is the fact that we, as a grantee of the state, would be placed on the Illinois Stop Payment List on March 17, 2021, due to the fact that we're out of compliance on these audit requirements. And so we're going to get into more about what that means to us as the Regional Planning Commission and potentially what that impact could mean. Let's move on. So the impact of the Illinois Stop Payment List, this would entail our inability to draw cash from the state. So we are, again, we're grant funded. We do the work and then we have to submit go back, sorry, Rita, go back to the, okay. So I'm gonna go through cash draw suspension, the fact that this stop payment list will impact our grant execution or modifications, which we're in the process of doing. The stop payment list will also be archived by the state of Illinois and could have an impact on future awards. And then I think this was something that I believe Patrick Brown brought up. This is indicative of some systemic issues for us as part of the county, which could have some other impacts on grants that we operate here as the Regional Planning Commission. And then I'm going to talk about the federal impact as well as what this means for clients that we serve in this community, as well as our staff. So the cash draw suspension. So we cannot draw down cash to reimburse any of our costs that we incur as an agency. This is inclusive of payroll to pay our staff that are doing the work, as well as other accounts payables. By our projections and estimations, we're looking at that the impact, given the fact that this stop payment is in effect, monthly cash flow requirements for us to operate this organization are at about $1.7 million. And so if indeed the audit is completed by June, we're projecting that our cash flow needs would be about $5.3 million. And that would allow us to essentially be able to take care of our accounts payable, as well as to take care of client benefits and services that we do as a result of the grants that we receive from the state. This, again, just to be clear, it's not just state funding. This is also inclusive of federal pass-through, meaning these are block grants that are passed through the state of Illinois. So anything that goes through the state of Illinois would be subject to this stop payment list. So it's not just DCEO. As I'm going to go through, you will see there are other departments that we deal with at the state level that this will have an impact on. Let's move on. So to highlight some of the departments, so this entails the Illinois Department of Human Services, the Department of Transportation, Department of Children and Family Services, the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, Illinois State Board of Education, and then the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board. So those are the key state agencies that this stop payment list has an impact on. So it's not just DCEO. And on the annualized total that we would be impacted from this would be about $17.3 million.
You're saying that would be the case if you were on the stop pay list for the entirety of a year?
Correct, yes. Right now, the stop payment list is temporary as indicated in the letter, but if it was for a whole year, I just want to give you a bigger picture that this is about 17 million on an annual basis, not between now and June, annual basis. The other issue then is on grant executions and modifications, which we're in the process of submitting to the state. So because this is in effect, these grants that we're submitting cannot be processed by the state of Illinois. So I just want to be clear that it's not just about cash flow, which I addressed earlier. This is also about us having grants and modifications of existing grants being processed by the state of Illinois, that this will not be processed as a result of this stop payment issue being in effect. And then we also have a number of new and continuation grants that will have a start date of July 1st, 2021. And those, again, cannot be executed. And this would have a negative impact on our ability to continue with program operations and staffing. And as you all know, we are in the process of providing COVID relief to our community. And having this in place really impedes our ability to continue with these services that are much needed in our community. And so some of those grants, just to highlight a few of them that would be impacted, would be weatherization, justice diversion funding, homeless prevention, workforce development, which is much needed right now, energy assistance. And I think most of you do know that President Biden just signed the new stimulus, and contained within it is some additional resources, many of which would be for programs that we operate here at the RPC. And if we're still in this predicament, that would preclude us from accessing those resources so that we can continue to provide services to the community. And I think our estimation, and I hope I'm not going ahead of a slide, but our estimation of grants that are being modified as well as new grants that are being submitted totals close to about $18 million. I guess I did go ahead of the slide. So this just kind of gives you, I won't go through each one of these, but it kind of gives you a sense of the grants that are in process of being submitted to the state. And it kind of goes across the board. It's not just, our social service programs. It includes our transportation grants that we submit to the Illinois Department of Transportation. And again, that total that we're looking at here is about $18 million that may not be processed as a result of us being placed on this stop payment list. And I believe now Betty's going to go into further detail. So thank you.
Sure, good morning. And just to clarify or add to what Delizio has indicated, the original letter that was sent from DCEO, which is our cognizant agency, they initiated the stop payment on all DCEO grants as of March the 2nd. So the fiscal staff has tried to draw down funds as of March 2nd, and we are locked out of drawing any reimbursements from DCEO. The other state agencies, if the deficiency is not addressed or resolved by March 17th, the remaining agencies, which are DCFS, the Department of Human Services, IDOT, the Illinois State Board of Education, those will also have stop payment because all of the state agencies have to follow the directive in the GATA portal. You go to the next slide, Rita, please. So these are all the grants that our staff are currently developing. Many of these are new. Some of them are continuation grants. And again, we generally submit those in early spring for a start date of July 1st. So state agencies review these proposals and they generally have to, give us an award document, and that takes a significant amount of time so that we can start services on July 1st, which is the state fiscal year. So as you can see, we've got over $10 million in community services grants that are going to be applied for, 2.2 million in planning and community development, which includes transportation infrastructure grants, early childhood, which is close to 2.9 million for preschool for all and other additional service. So again, state agencies are precluded from reviewing and awarding any of these grants while we are on a stop payment list until the compliance issue is addressed. Next slide, please. The other issue is that the state payment list is archived, and that impacts future awards for us. As Delitzo mentioned, we are primarily a grant-funded agency, so we have to operate in the competitive grant marketplace. So stop payment status occurrences will be documented as part of the grant making or modifying process, which means state agencies will see this when they review our proposals. So this will likely negatively impact our ability to secure new and continuation grant funding. The GATA portal and the Federal Clearinghouse will document 3 years of audit delinquencies, compliance issues, and the designation of Champaign County now as a high-risk auditee. So these current circumstances pose a short and a long-term threat to the RPC's operations, our client services, which are to the most vulnerable in our community, and our overall competitiveness in securing innovative and new grant funding that serves all of us in Central Illinois. Next slide, please. So the single audit timelines, as you can see here, this is a historic documentation of the delinquency for the past 3 years. So for the fiscal year of 17, the audit is due 9 months after the end of the fiscal year, which would have been September of 2018. That audit was submitted December of 18, so it was 3 months delinquent. The 2019 FY18 audit was due September of 2019. It was submitted by the county on July 8th. It was 10 months delinquent. The 2019 audit was due September 30th because of the circumstances related to COVID. The federal government extended that, and the state likewise, to December 31st with a projected submission date of June 1st. That will be 6 months past due. So there is a historic timeline of delinquencies that indicate the risk to our agency because of these continuing issues. Next slide, please. So the fiscal infrastructure, as Delitzo said, we are a division of Champaign County. We share the same FEIN number. So, you know, the single audit, we are all under the Federal Single Audit Act. So the RPC has no ability to have a separate audit or to somehow be separated from the single audit. So we're inextricably tied to the county. So these systemic weaknesses in the county's fiscal infrastructure have certainly negatively impacted the RPC. And I think the gravity of the current situation is that we're not able to draw down funds. And that means we can't serve clients and we can't continue to sustain operations because we have no ability to secure any other funding. And so we're inextricably linked to these outstanding issues related to reporting, internal control, segregation of duties, and adequate, competencies within various county departments. And there continue to be, as Michael Malott from Baker Tilly indicated, continuing issues that are still outstanding that preclude this audit from being completed. Next slide, please. The federal impact. So the auditor's office has been contacted not just by state agencies, the State Office of Accountability, but also the Federal Audit Clearinghouse related to the submission of the FY19 audit. So, given the gravity of this situation, the federal consequences of delinquent single audits will also include drawdown restrictions, withholding a percentage of federal funds, suspending federal funds, and then the worst case scenario would be termination of federal awards. Given that we're having an upcoming Focus Area 1 review from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for our Head Start and Early Head Start grants, which totaled nearly $7.5 million, we are at serious risk of placement on what they call the DRS, which is the Designation Renewal System, which would negate our non-competitive grant status. This would be an extremely serious consequence on the federal level for our Head Start program. Next slide. Delitzo, I'll let you talk about client and staff impact.
So as I alluded to at the beginning, what this means is that it does have an impact on our ability to continue to provide ongoing services that support our residents in this community. As I said again, we are in the midst of providing a variety of programs and services that are related to this COVID-19 pandemic and providing relief to a lot of our residents. And I think this does put us at risk of continuing to do that if we're not able to access any of the cash from the state of Illinois. Funding limitations may also result in staffing and potentially program reductions. And again, our mission and vision is to provide complementary services that are aimed at achieving client self-sufficiency and community enhancement. And we believe that not having the resources to do this, this compromises our mission and vision as an agency within this community. Next slide. So we do have recommendations, and I think what we've done here is following what was presented earlier is to highlight to you what the impact is to the RPC. This is not in any way not overstating or exaggerating. We have spent quite a bit of time looking at state regulations and what that means, and so this is, and then also looking at our internal operations and how our inability to operate, what that means. And so before I get into the recommendations, again, we have more of the short-term issue, which is a cash flow issue that's going to be part of my recommendation, and then some of the long-term issues that I also would like to address in this recommendation. So the first recommendation is that we are asking the commissioners to work with the county board and asking that the county provide us with the cash flow requirements between now and when the audit is completed and submitted, so that we do continue to provide the services in this community, as well as continue to have staffing in place to do that. And I think, I'm not sure if this is the last slide, but I think that the amount for us to do that is about $5.3 million, which I think I pointed out at the beginning that that's what our projections are in terms of cash flow between now and June. And so we're asking the county board to look at the general corporate fund to support the RPC so that we have uninterrupted services as well as staffing, so we continue to do the work that we're doing right now in providing a variety of services in this community. The second recommendation we have from staff is to request that the county expedite the completion of the single audit. And I think this was discussed last time when we were looking at the 2018 audit, perhaps to look at some external consultants to assist. And I know the county auditors talked about bringing in a former deputy treasurer to assist in the treasurer's office. If there are any other external contractors that the county could utilize to expedite this and hopefully get this done before June of 2021, I think that will be beneficial, at least in the short term, beneficial to all of us involved in this. And then the third recommendation, I think, given some of the systemic issues that Betty has highlighted, and the fact that we don't have control, meaning the RPC does not have control over what happens with the countywide audit. If there are significant issues that have resulted from one division or department or the other, and we don't have control over that. We don't have control over the fact that the audit has been delayed, even though there are no issues regarding the RPC. We would like to request that the commissioners, together perhaps even with the county board, look at this structure, because again, we are primarily funded through grants. 80 to 90% of our funding are federal and state grants. And of recent, the regulations have been tightened in terms of organizations that are grant funded. And so I think it really warrants for our governing bodies to look at this structure. How can we best mitigate any future impacts on the Regional Planning Commission as a unit of local government within Champaign County? And I know that on and off, some of these ideas have been discussed, but this particular crisis that we're in right now, I think really necessitates for our governing bodies to really review this structure and look at how can we insulate this portion of the county that is grant funded so that we don't have these consequences that may impede not only our ability to operate in the short term, but our ability to be able to get any future funding to address the needs of our community. That's pretty much what I have, Mayor. Thank you all. Thank you, commissioners.
I have follow-up questions on your recommendations, Delitzo.
Mhm.
On two of them. On the first one, where you're asking for county general corporate fund support, what is your bank balance right now?
So, and I'll have Betty tag in on this. So our reserves, most of our reserves are restricted. And I don't believe that we can access those to cash, to address, this cash situation that we're facing. But I'll defer to Betty to give you more on that.
So under our federally approved cost allocation plan, we are only able to over recover on our indirect or administrative cost rate enough for 60 days of operations, and that's over a period of years. So right now, the only unrestricted balance that we have is $1.1 million. All of the other cash resources are restricted based on the source of funding and the use of that funding. So it can't be just used for general operations. So we have 1.1. And we have very limited ability to grow that because we are strictly on a reimbursement basis. And this is a new regulation at the federal level to allow the 60 days of operational funding, which takes a number of years to grow.
I'd like to translate that into time. What are your annual operational costs?
Well, the 3 months that we talked about here is 1.7 and 3 months is 5.3. So, we have a $34 million budget, 17.5 million of which is the federal Head Start program, and the other 17.5 are direct state resources and also federal pass-through funding from the state.
But of your unrestricted reserves, I'm saying what portion of the year is present in the bank?
Sorry.
Of your operations budget, I mean, this is where you can't reassign money, so I understand that part. But I'm trying to compare your bank reserves to your annual or to your 6 month or to your 3 month requirements for strictly operational expenditure.
Right. And that's why we have an ongoing reimbursement flow. So the fiscal staff are constantly, once they get actual payroll and expenditure data, we are always on a continuous cycle of drawing down funds immediately from the federal and the state government to continue to sustain those operations. So again, we have very limited ability to grow an unrestricted reserve.
The other recommendation, so I'm just, I am trying to scope out the necessity of the county to take care of cash flow. It would seem to me that it would be several months before you bounce a check, but I will look into that on my side as well. After all, an auditor does fact check. The other one was where the task force would review the structure and organization of the RPC to mitigate compliance issues. I think that's very interesting because one thing I wonder about is whether or not there could be a percentage of the grant funds devoted to an additional staff member somewhere in the county's finances, whether it's in my office or the treasurer's office or in finance. We're really lean. And if you wanted to have smooth sailing forever and never suffer a bump in the road, I think we'd have to be staffed up. Do you have that ability? Do you have the flexibility or the discretion to allocate money in that way?
Mr. Auditor, with all due respect, I think that's this recommendation. We're really asking that the commissioners and the county board perhaps work together to figure out what that would look like. I don't have any specifics in terms of what that should look like, but I think if it's something that is open for discussion, I think those types of issues could be discussed within that task force.
Okay.
And to speak to the issue of the cash flow, George, you likely see in our cash balance, we received a deposit from the Department of the Treasury for $6.2 million. That money is designated for our emergency rental assistance program. And we have over 1,500 applicants for that money. So we cannot repurpose that money to sustain cash flow for the RPC. Those are restricted funds.
I realize that.
Any other questions for Betty or Delitza?
Yeah, I had a couple. This is Patrick. I guess I was really happy to hear them talking because they answered two of my questions. One of which was, are there any options to separate our audit? Sounds like we're bound by federal regulations for the single audit. I get that. Second one, Delitzo handled at the end, which was something that he's right, on again, off again discussions. But I, for one, 100% in favor of finding a way to separate the RPC from the county once and for all. I know your predecessor, Delitzo, was, he had his frustrations through the years. And I just think, I do feel encouraged. The treasurer, replied in the chat. So I do feel encouraged that we're not going to be facing this maybe again a year from now. So that was certainly encouraging. But at the same time, I just think that the RPC is big enough on its own to sustain itself on its own. I think we should explore ways to find out how that can happen. Now, having said that, my question or clarification is for Delitzo or Betty. What I'm hearing is in new funding that we have out there that we're trying to get is about $16 million, which is huge impact on community services. I mean, that's a great number. Think of everything that can be done for the community in need. The other number, and you might have said it, but if you could just repeat what that is, how much are we impacted right now? Besides the 16 million potentially, what is our impact right now that is at risk? And was at risk last year too, by the way, a year ago. But how much is at risk directly affected? That's it.
Yeah, do you want to take that one?
Well, again, Patrick, I think the issue is that state agencies start reviewing our grant proposals in May and June, and they can't execute any of these proposals. So our staff is preparing all of these, inserting data budgets into the state portal. And, the state agencies are precluded from awarding any of these. So all of this money is at risk unless this issue is resolved. And so that's why I think it's critical that we expedite and try to get the audit submitted before June the 1st so that state agencies like DCO and IDOT can have sufficient time and resources to review our proposals and award funding to us.
I can't see that. I can't see the chart. So sorry. So like I said, 16 million, Delitzo said, in future funding that we have, that we're trying to get from the stimulus and other things. What does that number say? How much is on hold right now or at risk?
So in terms of what's being processed for grant proposals and modifications is actually $18.8 million. What we don't have within that number is potentially what is coming down as a result of this most recent stimulus signed into law by President Biden. And as I said, within that, there are all kinds of programs that we already operate with additional funding, and we did not include what those numbers would look like.
All right, thank you.
I believe Kyle Patterson had a question or wanted to speak.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for putting this all together in such a short time. I know this has been a stressful week. When you discussed the, obviously that there's an issue with RPC being tied to the county's audit, and right now there are federal restrictions to that. Are there steps that could be taken, and do you know what those steps are to allow RPC to have its own independent audit as opposed to being tied to the county?
And I don't know if the Michael Malad is on, or Betty, if you want to take it on. We've looked at that, and my understanding is we can't have RPC's audit done separately with the existing structure where we're sharing the same FEIN number as the county, but I would defer to either Betty or Michael Malat.
Well, so that's correct. I think while an audit could be done separately for RPC, it wouldn't necessarily satisfy the grantor requirements, as some of the grants are issued to the county in their name rather than to RPC specifically. And so some of that research we did previously, and which RPC staff has done, and is really related to who will accept a standalone RPC audit. If the granting agencies, whether it's state level or federal level, will allow it, primarily related to probably some sort of structure change, that would be when it would make sense to do, or actually be something that would come out of a separate audit, I guess is the best way to put it. We could do a separate audit now and it really wouldn't matter because it wouldn't meet the requirements laid forth by the granting agencies.
Another question I had for the RPC staff is, so for grant payments that may be missed in the period from now to June, if removed from the list in June, would you be able to receive back payment for the grants that were missed?
I believe so. And I think that we're still would continue to do the work, but I do believe that the state would reimburse us because this is a temporary stop payment. So once the issue is addressed with the state, I do believe that we would be able to get reimbursed for the expenditures that have been incurred while we've been on the list. Betty, am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. And just let me point out here. So for the past 35 years, the Regional Planning Commission has had no fiscal or programmatic compliance findings in any of the county's single audits. So this is an entirely new circumstance for us. We've never been in this situation before. We've never been to the extreme situation where the state has stopped payment for state direct grants and federal pass-through grants. So this is unexplored territory for all of us. And frankly, I don't know, how this will evolve, but we're hopeful that they will, once the stop payment is lifted and removed and the compliance issue is resolved, we're hopeful that we can retroactively draw those funds.
Let me just interject here. We have short-term and long-term issues on the table here, but are under discussion here. Short-term, you're asking the county to cover the cash flow shortfall for the next, through June. And as I understand it, that would be basically a loan to RPC. The county would be paid back if they did provide the funds for this interim period. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then the other thing is the urging the county to complete the audit just as quickly as possible and figure out what resources are needed to do that. That's the other major thing.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And I know, Jim, you have your hand up. I just want to point out, we do not have any action items on the agenda. So legally, we cannot take any official action as a board today, but we could, I think, and I'll need some guidance on this, at least have an informal sense of the board if you want to develop a letter to send to the county. Just keep that in mind. Okay, Jim, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this board needs to put together a strategy to separate from the county. I don't see this as an opportunity for, if we started the strategy right now, you're still going to be bound by the 2020 audit. You're still going to be bound likely by the 2021 audit. And so you're looking at some level of, for sure, the 2020, some level of 2 more years.
Yeah.
And certainly RPC is big enough to manage their own business at this point. It's not like the county offers, in my opinion, much professional service for RPC that you can't get somewhere else. So I think we need to start a strategy to separate the RPC from the county. Just my personal opinion.
Darlene Kleppel wishes to speak. I'm
I
not
just
seeing
wanted-
all the panelists, so
Yeah,
thank
no,
you
that's
for helping
fine.
me.
I just wanted to mention that this is going to be a complicated issue. I know it's been considered in the past, but one thing to think about is that some of the grants that RPC receives are actually in the county's name. And some of, so there's a complicated structure that's been set up to deal with a lot of these things. And I do agree that a task force looking at it pretty carefully would be necessary to try to figure out where all those points are. For example, other grants from the county that come through the cognizant agencies that we might be at risk would be highway grants. And then other, some of the things that you receive in terms of Head Start grant actually is a county grant. So it varies like that from grant to grant. I think we need to figure out how to sort of pull those threads apart if we're going to try to talk about restructuring.
Darlene, does the county have funds in the corporate fund to cover this short-term need?
We do have a general fund reserve right now that is at the top end of our hoped for amount. I don't know how long we could actually carry that because obviously the county might be also carrying funds at this point. And we might have additional things, but we do have money coming from the feds if we're able to access it. So there should be a lot of money coming from the new stimulus package that can be used for different things for all the agencies, the municipalities, the county, RPC, everyone. But the question is, will we be able to get it if the stop payment is in place? Because my understanding is the first payment should arrive potentially in May, which is before June when the expected audit is to be done. So I can't answer that question. We do have some funds, but how much we could actually loan, I don't know. I would have to talk further with our finance person.
Okay. Kyle, did you want to, I'm getting a message. You wanted to speak again?
Yeah, I wasn't quite finished earlier, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
And I guess I just want to sort of make a statement from the county board standpoint that, my position is anything that we can physically do, I'm in support of doing and doing as swiftly as possible when it comes to loans or potentially extra resources for speeding up the audit. And I guess the question for George, if he's still on, I know it was mentioned the possibility of working with an outside firm or bringing on additional former staff. George, can you speak to what you think the surest, quickest way that we can increase resources to get the audit done?
I brought up bringing back Pius for a while as additional staff from the treasurer's office. And for the circuit clerk, we're working with the external auditors, see if they may have resources to write their financial report for this year to complete their component audit. So those are the two ideas we're talking about. And we're all sitting down together Monday to make sure that they're agreeable. We'll also have word from Baker Tilly whether they can actually take it on. But those are two different ones.
Thanks.
Any other board comments?
I had a question.
Sure.
I don't know if it might be for Darlene or Kyle, but because we have RPC grants that are in the county's name, my question is, has the county received a stop payment order as well? Are there grants that we're still going to receive money for through the county, or is in the county in the same boat? How does all of that work?
So my understanding is the county doesn't normally receive those because the way that RPC is described is that it has a cognizant agency for all of its grants that it receives. And so it receives the communication about that through DCEO. So they would be the one to make that decision. Eventually, of course, basically if they're making that decision and they stop funding, it gets moved up to the county, but they are the contact for those letters when they're coming in. So the county, my office is not receiving them. The county's office wouldn't receive it unless, for example, if the highway department, for example, decided to do a stop payment directly, they would send it to me as well. But for Head Start, it just goes to RPC because they're the contact for that grant.
Well, I'm just wondering about things like the mental health board or RPC grants that flow through the county, or you mentioned highway funds, road funds. I mean, if there is a stop payment relating to funding, is it just the RPC side, or is it the county?
No, it would be the county. It's the same, it's a single FEIN number, and so it would come to the county as a whole. And the stop.
So just to address that.
So your funds are restricted as well on some level?
Betty, go ahead and answer that.
So DCO, as our cognizant agency, initiated the stop payment on March 2nd for us. All of the rest of the state agencies, and that includes every state agency that provides funding to the entity, which is Champaign County. So that includes RPC, that includes Highway, that includes the Children's Advocacy Center. Anybody that gets state or federal pass-through funds as of March 17th will also be on the stop payment list. And their funding will be at risk as well. So this is on the entity, not on a division. And the entity is Champaign County.
And just to add to that, there are comments in the chat from the state's attorney and Carrie May that the Children's Advocacy Center also received the same notification from their cognizant agency as a result of this being placed on the county.
And I would assume that once the stop payment order, because it started with just the RPC DCO grant, but now we're getting close to the 17th. And so I think the other agencies are beginning now to send out the letters and say, this is money that you get from us. It's now on stop payment.
How is the March 2nd date seems to be retroactive? How is it that we didn't even get the non-compliance letter until March 3rd, the one I appealed, but we've got stop payment going back retroactively to March 2nd, which is what Elizabeth alluded to. Can you depict the language in that?
I mean, you'd have to talk to the Office of Accountability, but I can tell you that we've tried to draw funds subsequent to March 2nd, and we are locked out of drawing any funds through the Department of Commerce.
That's with negative 1 day notice. I just want that to be on the record. I know that the press is here and WCIA is as well. Normally, stop payments give you 45 days advance notice, not negative 1 days. They did not communicate with us, although we were proactive throughout the year. I indicated that on my March 21st document. I know all of you read the auditor's update, which is on the county's website. So it's shocking that this Mount Etna erupts after dormancy.
So my other question is, and again, maybe more county focused. So Kyle and Darlene, what can we do as a body to help move things forward? So, George had suggested, trying to help pay for an additional staff person. We don't have access to funds at this point, so I don't know that works. But, do the outside auditors need additional help? What can be done to try to speed the process up? And maybe that's, we come back at the next meeting with that plan. But I'd like to figure out a way that we can try to proactively get this taken care of.
And if I could jump in here on the letter from the Department of Commerce on March the 2nd. So the letter that came from GATA indicates that it served as notification that we were not in compliance with the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, and we have been placed on a fine lock at the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. All cash and future funding from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity have been suspended until the deficiencies are resolved. So that's effective March 2nd, and that was in the letter from that we received on the 2nd. So that's why it was suspended as of that date.
Now those monies are very specific and narrowly defined, right? Because most of what they're talking about is still starting March 17th. And that was true for CAC and it was true for the bulk of RPC funds. So what are you referring to specifically? Is this some kind of operational funds allowance from the DCEO?
Our primary funding, state and federal pass-through funding, is with DCEO. It's over $10.7 million on an annual basis. So that's all the money that's stopped as of March 2nd.
Really, I think the only thing that's going to help at this point, I mean, obviously George can continue to talk with the director of DCEO and the Office of Accountability and see if he can resolve them giving us another extension. But I think internally, the county just needs to get this done. However, if that requires additional people or an outside consultant, or, there may be, I know he's mentioned Pius, there could be other, I know Daniel is still in town. There could be a couple of other people that have experience in the treasurer's office that might be able to put in some time that could help with this in the short term. Because it's really a 2 or 3 month process if we're going to get it done before June. So.
And just to add to that, Darlene, DCEO cannot offer an extension to the single audit requirements. Those are federal requirements. Those are codified in the Code of Federal Regulations. DCEO, the state does not have the ability to grant the extension. Only the federal government can do that.
Okay. Are you sure? Have you just a second?
Yes, I'm sure that's in. Yes,
I read it too.
So I guess my confusion would be if the audit last year was more late than the audit this year, why do they not have the discretion to extend it?
That's my question.
So in one of the calls that I chair a meeting with DCEO and all the community action agencies on a weekly basis. And one of the things that was shared, I think it was on Monday, is that while, in the last few months, the GAT2, which is the Government Accountability Transparency Unit within the state, was not enforcing some of these compliance issues in the past months, they have started to do so. And I can tell you that there are a number of agencies that have been placed on this list. It's not just ours. There were about 10 agencies, I believe, that the person from DCEO had shared with us. So, for some reason, they were not enforcing these compliance issues the last few months, but now they have started to do so.
Because they have discretion, and I'm going to talk to the Attorney General to get clarification from that. I do not expect it from local lawyers, and I don't expect it from non-lawyers. I do have a question, a general question. We're talking about the emergency situation, but nevertheless, what was the history of RPC and why was it consolidated into the county initially? Was it because of its small size and now it's outgrown itself and deserves an independent identity that Jim Goss alluded to? Probably both Darlene and you would have some perspective on that. Darlene?
It was originally formed. I wasn't there at the time, but Betty probably has longer history. It was formed as a department of the county because it was a requirement that the county set up a regional metropolitan council. There was a requirement for that. So that was mostly on the planning side, which interestingly is not the largest division of the Regional Planning Commission at this point, because we have used the commission because of its skills in obtaining grant funding and being able to manage grants. Right. That became the county arm to receive grants for services. And so the other divisions have grown. Head Start is the largest, and then the Community Planning Division is the next, and now they have the Workforce Development. But all of those divisions, I think, are larger than planning at this point, aren't they, Delitzo?
That's correct.
So that is now the smallest portion of what RPC does, even though that's the reason it was created. That's my understanding. Betty, can you speak more to that?
No, that's an accurate assessment, Darlene. We were primarily a planning and community development agency to begin with. And then we got, quite frankly, very successful in terms of getting grants and contracts. So, I've seen this agency grow from a staff of 30 people to a staff that we have right now of 335 people and a $34 million budget. And that's only because that we've been competitive in the grant marketplace and we've been able to secure funding for this community and address so many of the needs that our community has. So the agency has evolved.
And not only that, we are providing services in close to 18 counties besides Champaign County. So our footprint is much larger than where we're located.
Right. But you're consolidated with us. None of the other 17 counties audits could ever hold you up, right? I mean, so are there other regional planning commissions that are that transcend county division lines and are an entirely separate unit of government? It seems like we have a lot of those in Illinois.
Yeah, there are, George. There's a lot of them. And I think they're called metropolitan councils or just regional planning commissions that are regional.
Right. Or
I
council.
have a question for the auditor and also so we have the treasurer here who might have some insight. Some additional supports were suggested that we could put in place to speed up this process. Does either the treasurer or auditor have an estimate if we did put those in place of when we could have the audit done?
And Michael Malat is on the call. I mean, let's, Michael, is there any, can you estimate how much we could abbreviate the return of the opinion based on getting those elements?
It's tricky because the work we have, it just takes time that remains, particularly in some of the departmental work. I can't put an exact date on it. I think if we're able to have the information we need to work with, and I can pull together the resources in the firm, which I should be able to do the work. It's certainly not the end of this month, and it's not feasible. Could we shoot for the end of April? It's hyper aggressive. I can't promise that, but it certainly could be our goal to do so. It does require a lot of dominoes. I think that's the hard part with all of this in any audit, is that we can't do things until we have certain information. But then we have to analyze that information and then make second requests based upon that. It's a back and forth that requires a little bit of time. So we can certainly work to expedite past June 1st. I think a May 1 target is, while still not ideal, I think can be doable if we're able to hit our marks on all the different steps in the process. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough either way to speed that up. But we will do our best to do that.
I think a May 1st goal would be helpful to the RPC because they are not only for this year's, as Betty mentioned, this year's grants, they have to apply for next year's grants, which they have to get in June. So if they could get this resolved by the beginning or end of May, it would be wonderful.
Well, the end of May is our target date. So if we could trim 2 weeks, we'd be happy. It looks like what we're really, we don't want to archive a decision. I'm working on that. We're talking about what the cash flow needs are of the RPC and what the county can do to help it. And I'm looking, if you take a prorated portion of their non-administrative grant subject to delay, it's under our reserves, but I just want to know how uncomfortable it is.
Does the RPC have reserves?
Yes. Betty was saying that even the reserves are restricted to an extent. So if they have delayed payments, what they need to borrow would be to make up for what's reserved, but what's reserved is basically going to be their portion that pays for their administrative overhead. So we'd have to calculate that, but I wouldn't, we want to come with, I think that the figure would certainly be below the combined reserves of the county and RPC, absolutely. So nobody's going to bounce a check, but we want to make sure that we want to avert being on the stop pay list. That's the first thing. And then if we're on it, we want to be on it for as little time as possible.
Okay, well, I know I have a 10 o'clock meeting that I'm going to have to get off soon for. Are there any other comments or direction from this board? I'm getting the sense that people would support drafting a letter to the county board asking for short-term loan for whatever we need to cover RPC, plus assembling whatever resources are required to get that audit finished in a timely manner. Is that accurate?
Mayor, this is Will Kiles. I do agree with what has been said, what you just proposed. I fully in agreement with the staff recommendations.
Okay. Anybody not? Let's put it that way. All right, that's one thing that can be done. Otherwise, we really can't take any action at this meeting in terms of official action. And we'll work with RPC staff to get a letter drafted. If you have additional items that you think should be included, let staff know, and we will incorporate that. Any further comments? Questions that haven't been addressed? Okay. Thank you all for attending. Thanks to everyone for pulling that information together at such short notice. And we look forward to working together to get a resolution, both short-term and long-term. Any last minute comments from county officials or RPC staff? Okay. All righty.
You need a motion to adjourn?
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Nope, you would just need to adjourn, Mayor.
All right, then I will declare this meeting adjourned.